So in a word, the difference between affinity and advocacy is amplification. And, one of the things I like to say is the more advocates you have, the fewer ads you have to buy, because you've got people out there actively filling your funnel with very qualified referrals. And we know that somebody who comes in through a referral is much more likely to convert into a customer, much more likely to have you as the totality of their consideration set, rather than saying, I'm going to do a lot of research and talk to a lot of people. Because when somebody comes to us as a referral, we automatically trust them.
This is the Business of Advice podcast, where we help good advisors become great business owners. I'm excited to have Brittany Hodak joining us today on the Business of Advice podcast. Really excited because last week I actually got to spend quite a bit of time with Brittany. She came in and spent a lot of time with our team here at Advisors Excel, spoke to all of our employees, and then spent some time with our leadership also. Really talking about what we're going to talk about today, which is how do you create superfans within your organization. Just shared a lot of advice with our team and asked her if she would jump on the podcast with me also. So Brittany, thank you for joining me back again, this time virtual, but welcome to the Business of Advice podcast.
Thank you, Cody, for having me. It is an honor to be here. I'm excited to have our conversation today.
Well, I think what'll be fun, obviously we've prepped some of this off of your book, Creating Superfans, which we're going to talk about. I know a lot and people should pick up, especially, so many advisors listen to this show. So they're really focused on this idea of how do we create this incredible client experience. So great resource for them and their team around that. But I think what's going to make this great is just being able to spend some time with you. You and I did like an hour Q&A with our leadership team, and just some awesome takeaways I took from that we're going to work into what we talk about today that I know is going to apply to everybody. But why don't you start us? I asked you this question when you're in here too, like, how'd you get into this whole like client customer experience thing? Like, what's your story? I always love people to talk about their journey as we start this off.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Oklahoma and I always wanted to work in the entertainment industry. I was dead set on that. I was going to work at a record label or write for a music magazine or do something in the entertainment space. And the closest thing that I could do to that in the small town where I lived was work at the radio station. So I tried every year to go get to do what they call job shadowing at the local radio station. Finally, my sophomore year, I got to go job shadow, which is basically like, you spend 3 hours there, they show you around, you get school credit for it. And I said, please hire me, I'll do anything. And they said, well, you look like you're about the right size for the mascot suit. So if you're not opposed to dressing up as a giant bumblebee, you can do that. And I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds like the best job ever. I would love to do that. So I became Sting the Bee. And about 6 months after I'd started working at the station, the promotions manager came in one day and she was like, I keep seeing ads on TV for this Bridget Jones Diary movie, and I don't really know what it is or what it's about, but I just keep thinking we have a Brittany Jones at the station because my maiden name was Jones. She said, what could we do and call it Brittany Jones Diary? And I said, well, you're always talking about trying to get more people on the station website. What if I just interviewed all the bands that came to town? And, that was my diary. And she said, oh, like that other movie, that Almost Famous movie. Yeah, that's starting to get some Oscar buzz. We should do that. Make a list of all the bands you want to see and we'll arrange everything with the record labels. And I was like, what do you mean you'll arrange everything? Like what? And so just like that, it became my job to hang out with rock stars and brag about it on the internet. And I was 17 years old. And so this did a few things that sort of spoiled any chances of me ever getting, a quote unquote real job. I was like, oh my gosh, people will pay you to do the most amazing things. And it also made me hyper focused on fandom, like why some of these bands that I saw when they were just starting out became superstars and others just kind of went away. And I started to see that it wasn't necessarily correlated to marketing spend. It wasn't necessarily correlated to the label priorities. It wasn't necessarily correlated to like what the radio single was. And I saw that everybody around me was trying to figure it out too. So I decided I really wanted to study that. I really wanted to figure it out. So, I went through college, was interning at record labels and every other, entertainment music company that I could get to. And I just was so fascinated by this. And I ended up launching my own company when I was 26 called the Superfan Company that was about creating fan engagement tools for these superstar artists. My first big client was Walmart, which allowed me to work with, every superstar in the world, Katy Perry, Taylor Swift, Justin Bieber, you name it, plus legacy groups like the Beach Boys and George Strait and Kiss and Dolly and just, all of these amazing artists. And I started to see that the through line that I had been looking for of like what makes these artists work, what makes them have longevity, what makes their fans care about them, was the same thing that was true across all of these other aspects of human behavior and consumer behavior. CPG brands and startups and, just everything. And that through line was the things that people care the most about are the things that they feel like they matter to as well, whether that's a brand, whether that's a band. Superfans are created at the intersection of your story and every customer story. If you want your customer to think of you not just as a commodity provider, but as a category of one, they have to feel like they matter to you. There's this exchange of caring, this exchange of story that has to happen. And so once I realized that, I was like, wow, maybe what I've seen be true in the entertainment space is true across the board in every vertical. And the more I studied it, the more I looked at it, the more I saw that it was in fact true that the number one way to get people to care about you and your thing is to care about them and their things. And when you can show that, you of course endear yourself to them and you begin those relationships that are based on more than just a transaction.
It's good. One of the things I want to ask you, this is kind of going off script, but what I've learned is anytime you talk about Taylor Swift, it boosts your ratings, right? So one of the, she's obviously all the news here in Kansas City, and it's kind of crazy to watch just that phenomenon. But it was like, I say this in a way of like, we talked a fair amount about her and just how she's done that. And I know you've done a little work with them. Maybe just talk about like what she does so well to create these super fans. Because it literally this morning before we were recording, there was an article that came out that said she boosted the economy by like $5.6 billion, her tour did. And so it's just pretty incredible to watch. Just any lessons you've learned from kind of time around her and just watching what she's done so well?
Yeah. So the first time I met Taylor, she was 17 and I was 22. I was working at a record label in New York. We met at an after party for the CMT Awards, and she had just won her very first ever like real award where she got to be on TV, and she was so excited. She got a belt buckle, like there were belt buckle trophies for the CMT Awards, and she got the belt buckle for Breakthrough Video of the Year. And we were talking at this party because, I had been very in touch with things that artists were doing online because I had, run this website for so many years. And as I worked at the radio station, it started getting syndicated to other radio stations. And so it was like getting picked up. And, so I'd been paying a lot of attention to Taylor because I thought it was very unique that she wrote all of her own songs as a 16, 17-year-old.
Yep.
And the thing that she was starting to really have like trades right about was that she was doing all of her marketing online. She was spending a hugely disproportionate amount of time on MySpace. So at the time she was on an opening tour for Rascal Flatts, and she was spending like all of her time on the tour bus messaging people on MySpace. And I talked to her and said, where did that come from? Is that just like you as a high schooler, love MySpace? Is that something the label came up with? And I will never forget what she said. She said, I want 1 million people to buy my album. And I know that if I am going to get 1 million people to spend $10 to buy my CD, I have to make them care about me because they're not going to care about my music until they care about me. So I want them to know I care about them. So she was on a mission to connect with 1 million people, either online or offline, to make them care enough to say, yeah, I'll support this girl. I'll buy her CD. And she's never lost that fan first mentality. Yeah. And you talk to any Swiftie and they will tell you, Taylor loves me. Taylor sees the stuff I post online. She pays attention to what's happening in my life. When I write her a letter, she writes back. When I do this, I get that. And that is something that it's very, very, very hard to fake because fans have a really great sense of whether or not, whatever it is, whether it's a brand, whether it's a service provider, whether it's an entertainer, if you feel like you matter or not. Like anywhere that you spend money, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's, an NFL club where you're buying season tickets, you have a sense of if they care about you or if they care about the revenue you represent. And in one of those scenarios, like you are replaceable. And the other, you're not. And Taylor has built a remarkable career. I mean, and look at any metric that you want, right? Like she
Yeah.
dominates across everything. And the reason is because she has tens of millions of fans who say, I matter to Taylor and Taylor matters to me.
Well, you know, it's such a hot topic here in Kansas City with her and the whole Travis Kelsey thing. You know, it's you see that effect where, you know, every game she's attended now, the tickets are selling for like astronomical prices. They're the highest watched games on TV. Travis and his brother's podcast is like the number one podcast in the world now. You know, his jersey's like the number one selling jersey. And it's fascinating to see how she's done it because you like people paying these astronomical prices to go to the same game she's at. I'm like, you ain't seeing her at the game, right? She's up in some box, but just to be able to say that you're there, it's pretty wild to watch. I don't think I told you this when you were in, but she actually played at the county fair where I grew up in Western Kansas when she was 17. That Tim McGraw song had just hit like after they had booked her, and I didn't know who she was, but we had taken my son back there. He was probably 3 or 4 at the time. And I went to the concert with one of my high school buddies and had no clue who she was, but just watching I mean, it was packed, and it was all like high school, college girls that just loved her. And I'd never heard of who she was. But I remember after that saying, like, this girl's going to be huge. Like, you could just see it in the way that she engaged with her fans. She's also an incredible performer, right? So take away the way she engages as part of it, but she's also a pro. Like she puts on a show and does an awesome job, which I think there's just so many things that, and we'll dig into this a little bit, our advisors or any business owner can learn from that. It's like fan engagement, huge part of it, making them feel like you care about them. But then not also overlooking the fact like you do stuff with excellence, right? Everything she does like is she puts on a great show, great production, does her stuff with excellence too, which I think is a big part of that.
She does her stuff with excellence, and she also does everything she does is done with intentionality.
Yep.
She's
That's a good
always
point.
thinking several steps ahead. It is never like, oh, well, I guess we'll do this. It is, she knows exactly what the roadmap looks like for the next, 24 months
Yeah.
or longer. She knows exactly what she's working toward. And I think being able to bring that intentionality to what you do frees up so much of the chaos and the clutter in your mind. Like if you know exactly what the plan for your business is and you know what it's going to take to get you there, then it's much easier to make those decisions day to day. It's much easier to have that focus in those conversations with your clients because you've got that North Star. You know where you're going. And so what that does is free up more of your attention to be really present in those moments and to look for ways to elevate those interactions with every single client that you're talking to.
Yeah, that's good. She is very intentional. That's a good lesson too. So, okay, let's move off Taylor.
But what about our ratings, Cody?
I know. But let's go on this same thing because she obviously has super fans. Can you describe the difference between maybe a happy, engaged client and a super fan? Like why you should be building super fans and maybe what the difference is to tell? Like I have clients who like us, right, and are engaged, but they're maybe not super fans.
Yeah. So in my book, I talk about what I call the ladder to super fandom and all the steps, all the sort of rungs on a ladder. And the top step is what I call advocacy. That's where people are amplifying your brand. They're not just coming back, they're bringing their friends. The step below that, where a lot of people stop, is affinity. And affinity is, people like you. They're probably not going anywhere. They're probably going to be loyal, but they aren't actively helping you grow your business. You can't look at your balance sheet and see that earned growth coming from those referrals, coming from that word of mouth marketing. So in a word, the difference between affinity and advocacy is amplification. And, one of the things I like to say is the more advocates you have, the fewer ads you have to buy because you've got people out there actively filling your funnel with very qualified referrals. And we know that somebody who comes in through a referral is much more likely to convert into a customer, much more likely to have you as the totality of their consideration set rather than saying, I'm going to do a lot of research and talk to a lot of people. Because when somebody comes to us as a referral, we automatically trust them. A lot of times we're like, cool, I'm going to talk to that person. As long as I like them, I'm done because I've got 17 million other things to do in my life. So like, if you can be my advisor, great. Let's like check that off the box and move on. So the difference between somebody who really likes you and somebody who is like a super fan of you is that amplification. They're not just, on what I would call the affinity stage, but they're actively advocating for you when the opportunity arises, when they're, out and about and somebody says, oh, I really got to get my financial stuff in order. Or, they happen to see in a Facebook group for their community, somebody's like, hey, can anybody recommend someone to help me with this? They're going to chime in. They care enough to spend the 45 seconds to like reply to that message, even if it's from someone they don't know personally, to say, talk to my guy or talk to my girl.
So let's talk about the framework of creating superfans. You have the super model that you talk about in the book. Will you explain the model and just some examples of how to use that?
Absolutely. So I think, just to kind of back up a little bit, where the super model came from was, I think that a lot of people create artificial silos in their businesses, whether you're a solo advisor or whether you've got a group of people working with you. A lot of times we like over categorize things in our minds, and we're like, this is just sales, this is just marketing, this is just serving my customer, this is just ops, this is just legal. And when a customer looks at a business, they don't see departments. Like they just see one person who is in the experience department. Like at any given time, anybody on your team is the chief experience officer of your company. They are expected to answer any question. They are expected to be able to take care of any issue or problem, or at least point someone in the right direction. And I think customer experience, which is really the totality of how somebody feels about your brand based on all of the touch points and all of the experiences they have, oftentimes people are like, oh, customer experience is customer service. And this customer service bucket exists outside of the sales bucket, the marketing bucket, the ops bucket, the admin bucket. We think that the responsibility falls to just a handful of people. And so part of what I tried to do with this framework that you mentioned, which I call the super model, super is an acronym, is to really dispel that myth that only a few people on your team are responsible for customer experience, or only a few people on your team are responsible for creating that desire of someone to want to come back or want to tell their friends. So I always say everybody is in the experience department, and experience is everything. So the super model, SUPER, is a framework meant to go across the entire company. It's simple to remember, it's simple to measure, and this is it. S is start with your story. And when I say start with your story, I don't mean like lead with your story. It's, why do you exist? What does your business do? Like, how would your customers' lives be worse if you weren't a part of it? Having that clarity, having that North Star, making sure everyone in your team is aligned around that reality is so very important. It's important for, for your brand, for continuity of experience, but also because whether consciously or subconsciously, every potential customer is really saying like, why should I pick you? Why should I work with you? Like, why should I let you be my advisor when there's a million other advisors? If you don't have a good answer to that question, they are never going to be able to figure it out. So even though you're not explicitly saying this is why you should pick me, you are answering the question, why should someone pick me? And using that to guide the communications and the marketing and the messaging that is everywhere all around your brand. Because ultimately, why should you pick me is the root of like every relationship you're going to start as an advisor, right? Knowing your differentiation, knowing your superpower, knowing what you can do to help your clients that maybe other advisors can't or aren't willing to or won't do. So that's the S. Start with your story, getting clarity on what it is that makes you, you.
Let's jump into the P. Not. I know we don't have time to probably go through all of them. They should go buy your book. That's a shameless plug for it. But the P to me is the one that is which stands for personalize. I would say our advisors. I just want to talk through this a little. Our advisors, outside of maybe a doctor, know some of the most detailed information about a person, right? The good and the bad, vulnerable parts of their lives. How should they think about personalization, with their clients, knowing that they know so much about them? And then I'm going to ask a second question. How much of that, because you said something about, technology and automation, like how much of that should be like super personal, versus you automate or have kind of a system to some of that also. So I know that was quite a bit there, but maybe
No.
just talk to the idea of personalization and just the wisdom you have around that. Maybe that's a good way to say it.
Well, thank you. And I will say, just to go back a little bit, I am going to just say that you is understand your customer story, because every pillar of the supermodel are kind of like nesting dolls, like each one builds on the one before. So
Yep.
you heard me say that super fans are created at the intersection of your story and every customer story. That's why the first two pillars are start with yours, understand theirs, and then P, personalize, is where those two things come together.
Yep.
So we are living in a world where personalization is not nice to have, it is the expectation. In fact, more than 71% of people say that they demand personalization from the businesses to whom they give their money, according to a study from McKinsey. So yes, it is important. And yes, if you are an advisor, you have a huge advantage because you know so much about your customers. And to answer your question about like how much of that you deploy, how personalized you are. In my book, I talk about this idea of personalization really being high tech and high touch, and those two buckets. And high tech are the things that are automated, the things that we know, the things that we've gotten through, tracking information. It's the ones and zeros. And the high touch are the things that actually still require a human hand. So we're sending a gift, we're writing a note, we're picking up the phone and calling somebody. And personalization is not about one over the other. It is about blending the two together in the perfect amount for your business. Because when high tech and high touch combine, that is where you truly create high impact. And the reason there's not like a magic formula to say like, oh, 80% automated, 20% not, or 60% automated, 40% not, is because every business is different. And additionally, every customer is different, and your customers want different things. So that you and understand your customer story is knowing that based on someone's age, based on where they live, based on their beliefs, based on their portfolio, they're going to have different wishes. They're going to want to be treated differently. And to the extent that you can do that, and then you can systematize the way you and your team show up for that customer, the more enjoyable their experience is going to be. I'm somebody who loves for things to be automated. I love to be able to do stuff on apps on my phone. I love to be able to take care of things as quickly as I can because like you, I travel a lot. Like I'm usually on an airplane or in a hotel and I want to just like get it done because I don't always have time to call and talk to somebody at 11:30 on a Tuesday morning.
Yep.
My mom, on the other hand, gets so freaked out by anything technology. She's convinced her iPhone is like taking her picture all the time. She'll send me like people will, send the like Google Maps picture of the house that's like your home could be worth this, like call us. And she's like, they're watching me. Where did they get this? And I'm like, Mom, it's from Google Earth. Chill out. You're fine. But like we have very different perspectives. We have very different needs as a customer. And what the best and the smartest advisors do is personalize the way that they walk alongside those customers. And it can be as simple as saying, there are 5 different behaviors that we see go one way or the other. So we're going to ask 5 intentional questions of everyone as part of onboarding or part of an annual review call to say, choose your own adventure. Like, do you like door number 1 or door number 2? Do you like this path or this path? And then record that, have that written down, whether it's in your CRM or however you track your customer information, so that everybody on your team knows, okay, we're always going to pick up the phone versus sending an email when we're talking to this customer, or we're always going to send something physically in the mail, even if we don't have to for compliance reasons or regulatory reasons for this customer. To the extent that you can personalize those touches, they will notice and they will think, wow, it's so easy to do business with you. You're so accommodating to all of the things. And it's kind of like butter and cooking, like when it's done well, you don't even like notice it. You don't even think about the fact that it's there. Like you can taste it, but you're not thinking about it. And that's like the way the personalization works. Somebody is not like, oh, they're going out of their way to like do these different things for me. They're just thinking, wow, it's so easy to work with your team. It's so great to work with your team.
That was such a simple one that I think is overlooked so often, like just how you communicate with them and using their preferred method of communication. I'm maybe similar, like I would prefer you text me, right? I'm on the phone all day, every day. The last thing I want to do is be on another phone call. So like if you can text me, I think that's a simple takeaway for everyone. Like on your onboarding, ask them, like, what's your preferred method of us communicating with you? Is it phone call, email, text? A simple way to do that and automate. Are there, not to put you on the spot, but I know you'll do great with the question. Are there some other simple ways that you've seen that are maybe easy, like you could go implement these next week to personalize that experience that is a high impact personalization point?
Yeah. So, one really great way is to find out the things that matter to their life. So, is this somebody who is like very family focused? Is this somebody who's very career driven? Is this somebody who loves celebrating holidays and birthdays? Is this somebody who's like all business all the time? To the extent that you can find out what motivates them personally, you can start to plug in and do things that are going to feel really special or really bespoke in different situations for that person. So, thinking about not just their financial life that you're a part of, but the things outside of that. What are their hobbies? What do they love to do? What's important to them? What causes do they care about? So that you can show up when appropriate, when contextually correct in those areas so that you're top of mind with them, not just when they're thinking about like, oh, I got to figure out what the insurance is going to be for next year. Oh, we're getting close to the end of the year. I've got all these things to do. But they feel like they know you because, the same way you mentioned Taylor Swift, like totally, impacts every part of the economy. It's because people want to dress like her. They want to eat the things she eats. They want to like, know about the guy she's dating. They feel very invested. They're not just like, oh, it's her music. It's Taylor the person, not just like Taylor the artist. And so to the extent that you can become this like full person to your clients, not just like, oh yeah, that's my advisor who I call like when I have a question about my policy or, something goes wrong, but like, oh, this is my friend Beth. This is my friend Josh. That's the space that you want to be occupying in their mind. That's the positioning that you want to have. And the more that you lean into personalization, the more that you lean into some of those things, the better your chances are. And for anybody who's listening, who's like, that is way too hard. I don't have time to make 287 new friends. Right. But you have time to make like 20 new friends.
Mm-hmm.
And by being strategic about the questions that you ask to show up in meaningful ways, these people are going to think that you're spending a lot more time, energy, effort than you actually are, because all they see is that they got a very thoughtful gift from you on an important day, or that you sent them this article, or you showed them this thing, turned them on to this like movie or TV show or whatever. They are going to think that you're spending much more time than you are, because on the back end, you have systematized it in a way that makes it simple for you to show up with contextual, personalized, added value at the right moment. It's like the right information to the right customer at the right time.
Trying to improve your experience, I know it can feel maybe overwhelming, but I'm always reminded, Andy Stanley has this great quote. He says, do for one with that which you wish you could do for all, right? And it's like, hey, just start somewhere. So even on this, like it could be like, take your top 10 clients and figure out a way that you're going to create this better experience and personalize for them. It's a little top of mind. We actually have a training event going on right now in our office, and it's for like newer advisors that have joined us. And one of our top advisors, Rob Russell's leading that. So he's just walking them through like, here's all the things we've done to grow our business. But he was sharing this morning, one of the simple things that they do around this, it's just so easy, but an awesome touch point. They, in their CRM system, so they offer a whole drink menu when people come in, right? It's coffees and teas and sodas, and they have different types of cookies they cook each morning and that. But a simple thing that they do is they record whatever that person got, so if they got their coffee black and she got a Diet Coke, they put that into their CRM system, and then the next time they come in, while they're taking the menu, they're like, hey, do you still want your coffee black and a Diet Coke or something, just to make it feel like, hey, we were looking, paying attention, listening to what you're doing. So that's a little bit of that. They're automating it. It's part of their CRM system, but takes 20 seconds before they come in to look up like what's their drink preference and being able to use that. So just some cool ways to do that. Let me ask you another question around maybe strategy as you've built some super fans. How do you engage them to talk about you to friends, family? Said another way, how do you get them to start referring people to you?
So once upon a time, I was working on a project with Feeding America, and the president of Feeding America said, "Do you know the number one reason people give us money?" And I said, tax breaks. And he was like, "Nope, try again." And I said, "Okay, people were impacted by food insecurity at some point in their past." He said, "Nope." And I said, "People see the good that your, food pantries and food kitchens are doing in their community." And at that point, I was like, "Can you please just tell me I've been wrong 3 times in a row? Like, what is the number one reason?" He said, "Again and again, when we ask, why did you donate? Why did you support? The reason people give is they were asked. Someone asked them to do it. So they said, okay." The number one reason that people give referrals is because they're asked to do so. And I think a lot of times as an advisor, you are like afraid to ask for a referral, or you don't want it to be awkward, or you're like, well, why should I have to ask? They should know that I want referrals. Like, obviously, why wouldn't I? But A, nobody is like thinking about you,
Yep.
even 1% of the amount of time that you are thinking about you. And number two, if someone has never worked in a sales-based job, they may genuinely not know how important referrals are.
Yeah.
They may not know how much capacity you have. They may think, oh, I don't want to refer anybody to Dan because then I'm getting less of Dan's attention, right? Like it may not be on their radar for a number of reasons. So the number one thing that you should do to increase the amount of referrals that you get is to ask for them. But you want to ask for them in the right way and at the right time. So you want to bring that intentionality to it. So at some point before you ask for a referral, you need to plant the seed. You need to say something like, "Man, Josh, it has been so great working with you these past several months. I think you are like my favorite type of client to work with. If you got anybody else that's like in your same shoes and your same situation, and you think I could help them the way I've helped you, I would love that introduction." So you're like, teeing it up. You're letting them know why you want it, and you're making it easy for them. Then when you actually are going to ask for those referrals or introductions, make it as simple as possible. Whether that's sending somebody an email saying, "Hey, I've got capacity to add a handful of people to my practice in the next year, and I was thinking about my favorite clients, and you came to mind. Would love to work with more people like you." Again, like whatever it is. So you're sort of painting the picture. This isn't just like me asking across the board. This is, I really like working with you. I would love to have more people like you as part of my practice. And then you're making it as simple as possible. You're saying, if you know anybody who you think I could help, would appreciate if you could, copy and paste these couple of sentences to send to them to let them know to reach out to me. And of course, anybody you send my way will always get the, velvet rope, white glove VIP treatment.
That's
so you're
good.
making it simple.
Transition a little from referrals. One of the other things that I think is really important in building this incredible experience culture is the people on your team. And we talked a fair amount about that when you were here in the office. You actually had a couple great, I'll call them questions or ways to try and identify people that get this idea of client experience in the interview process. You talked about having them describe to you sometime a company had created a great experience for them. And then this wasn't so much around that, but you also had this great question around like, what's a book, podcast, something they've read that's impacted them. Would you just talk about maybe those two concepts? And I'll take we've always told our people, like one of our like core values here is like, you're always growing. Mm-hmm. We've always left that up to like the manager role to ask them like examples around that. After you shared that, I told Matt Byer, who leads our HR, I'm like, that needs to be at your level, like our first interview, to guarantee that question always gets asked. And that needs to become like our knockout question. If you can't give me a book or a podcast or something that you've done in the past 3 months to try and grow yourself as an individual, like we shouldn't even move you on to the next step. So it was something simple, but just like was pretty profound of like, man, that aligns with our core values. So maybe just talk about those two things, like in an interview process and how they can help you identify the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. So, an analogy that I use is like, you can teach anybody to be a little bit better at basketball, but like you can't coach someone into being LeBron or Steph Curry, right? There are people who just naturally have, whether it's more God-given ability, more interest, more capacity for being able to get better. And so if you want a true culture of customer centricity, which like, if you don't, why are you still listening to this podcast?
Exactly.
So go do something else. So I'm assuming that you want to build customer centricity into the DNA, into the core of your business. You want to make sure that you're hiring people who have that servant heart, who have that mentality, because if you don't, you're never going to get that far. It's always going to be somebody, who's like, all right, I'm going to clock in, I'm going to pretend to care, I'm going to clock out. So a couple of questions that I mentioned that I always advise asking in the interview process is that, number one, what is the last book you read, podcast that you listened to, TV show that you watched, in order to improve something about yourself personally or professionally? Because we want people who are driven to always be improving. Another question that I love to ask is, what's the last time you were completely floored by your experience as a customer? It can be something little, it can be something big. And in this question, you're really just trying to find out whether or not people notice, whether or not they've got their antennas up, whether or not they're paying attention to the fact that not all businesses within any given vertical are created equal. You can also ask about the last terrible experience that they had as a customer, and talk about the way they or think of, listen to the way that they talk about that interaction, whether or not they're throwing blame at a lot of people, or whether or not they're saying oh, it was such a crazy set of circumstances that happened. And then finally, this is another question that I really love to ask is, especially if somebody who has worked within your industry before, but if not, it still kind of works as a general question, but it works really well within somebody who's in your specific industry or has had a similar role, is to say, tell me about a time when the situation with a customer went south because of things completely beyond your control. What were the things situationally that were totally out of your control? But what did you do to try to make things better for that customer? And what you're looking for is whether or not somebody is going to throw their hands up and be like, not my problem. I can't fix this, so I'm not even going to try, versus someone who has the emotional intelligence and takes the initiative to step in and say okay, well, even though I can't fix everything, let's talk about what we can do. Let's talk about what a path forward looks like and how we're going to get there together. And in the book, I write about the idea of the service recovery paradox, and the fact that most customers do not expect perfection. They expect you to try really hard, and they expect you to fix things when things go wrong. So a really strong thing that you want to be asking for and qualifying for in the interview process is whether or not somebody is going to be able to handle that service recovery. Because statistically speaking, when someone has an experience with you that's less than ideal, that is corrected, they will be more loyal and tell more people than if nothing had ever gone south in the first place, because they've seen that service recovery. So they now have a deeper understanding of how much you care, how far you're willing to go, what you're willing to do to make sure things get back to good.
I've said that over and over with our team. I said, we don't want to go out of our way to make mistakes, but how we handle a mistake can do more to create a super fan than anything else you can do almost. So I was going to ask this question hey, is there a company, because you were talking about a company that's created this great experience that they would remember, but I'll maybe change it, because Chewy.com, when you talked about them, I didn't know much about them. I've now ordered some stuff off their website just because you've sold me on them. I hope you have some affiliate deal with them, and you need to get one if you don't, because I think a bunch of people went and ordered stuff off their website after you talked about them. But maybe talk about just how they turned you into a super fan and just some of the things that they've done really, really well.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that I've brought you over to the side, and I know that they're going to take amazing care of you. So I first ordered from Chewy.com because one of my dogs, Bear, was having all kinds of digestive issues. And so the vet was like, I'm going to write you this prescription for this particular kind of dog food. I was like, prescription dog food? Why? What am I? This is the Twilight Zone. What is this? So I go home, I see that it's on Amazon. I don't feel like driving to Petco. So I do a Google search and Chewy.com comes up. And I'm like, all right, what's this all about? I go to the product page. It says, we need your vet authorization before we'll ship this. So I sent an email with the picture that I took on my phone of the little prescription pad and said, hey, here's the authorization for this order. To my absolute surprise, 10 minutes later, I got an email back from a person named Kelly who started the email by saying, hi, Brittany, thank you so much for sending Bear's prescription directly. I've applied it to your order and everything's set. Once it ships out, you're going to get an email with a tracking confirmation. If you need anything at all, give us a bark. And then she signed it, ciao, ciao for now, Kelly. And the thing that impressed me most about that email, well, there were a few things that impressed me. Number one was the speed. It was like not even 10 minutes later.
Hmm.
Number two, the personalization. I had not used my dog's name when I sent that email. I was like, here's the prescription for this order. Thanks. She wrote back and mentioned Bear by name, which mattered because I wasn't buying dog food for a dog. I was buying dog food for my dog. Just like those of you out there listening as advisors, people are looking for solutions for themselves and their families. It's important that like stake your claim to that personalization, to that humanization factor. And then, then it was just super easy. She gave me like everything I needed to know. She's like, here's exactly what's going to happen. If you need anything, you can get in touch with us, like a few fun puns. So much so that I replied to the email, which I didn't really like need to. She gave me everything, but it felt, almost like rude not to reply. So I sent like a 10-word email back. I was like, thanks so much. I appreciate it. And so does Bear. She wrote back again with a 100-word email that was like a masterclass. It was like, hey there, Brittany. Absolutely. It's our pleasure. We're so thankful for every wonderful member of our Chewy family like you. Please tell Bear we said hello. And if you ever get a picture of him enjoying his Chewy goodies, feel free to send it our way. We always love meeting our very important paws, VIPs. And then she like doubled down with the, like, we're here, rain or shine. If you ever need us, we're here. And I remember she signed the second email Over and Snout, which again, I thought was hilarious. And at this point, I was starting to feel like I mattered as a customer to Chewy. It does not get much more commodity than dog food, right? It's like the same bag of dog food anywhere. But all of a sudden, I don't want to buy that dog food from anywhere else. I want to buy it from this place that seems to care the most about me and my dog. And what's really interesting, at least to me, as somebody who studies customer experience and consumer behavior, is at that point, I am already like ready to tell people about Chewy before I have ever gotten a product.
Yeah.
Like, it's not about the product. It's not even just about the service. It's about the overall experience. And that was 7 years ago, 6 years ago, like a long time ago. And over the years, I've spent, I don't know, probably $10,000 or more at Chewy.com. I've shifted all of my purchases there. And on multiple occasions, they've gone out of their way to make me feel valued as a customer. They've sent like treats and toys that I didn't order. Every time I've had something go wrong and I've called them, they've been so helpful. Like one time, I'll never forget, I was like 9 months pregnant. Like my first son was due like any day. And I'd put like the flea and tick medicine on the dogs, but I forgot to put them in their crates. And it was the kind that was like the icky stuff that you like put on their back. And I went upstairs and I came back downstairs like 30 minutes later, and Bear was licking the medicine off of Bandit. And I was like, oh my gosh, I poisoned my dog. I'm like hysterical. I called Chewy.com and she was like, okay, we're going to like look at the ingredients. We're going to see what it is. She's like, everything's totally fine. Don't worry about it. She was like reassuring me I was not a terrible pet parent. And then she said, hey, did you know that there are chews that you can give your dogs for flea and tick protection? And you don't have to like do the ointment. And I was like, oh, of course I didn't know that, or I would have ordered them. And she said, okay, well, it's actually a different prescription, but if you're cool with it, I'll go ahead and call your vet and see if they can switch the prescription. And if so, I'll send this out for you. And I was like, that would be amazing. Thank you. And she said, and I see that you just ordered 6 months supply of the flea and tick medicine for your pets. I'm going to go ahead and refund your credit card. And I was like, that was like a couple $100s. And she was like, yeah, don't worry about it. If there's a shelter nearby, just go ahead and donate it, because a lot of time at shelters, they use that kind because they're in kennels anyway. So just like go ahead and donate it. We'll take care of everything. And you should have the flea and tick medicine in time for next month. But I know you said it was on your dogs for an hour, so don't worry about it. They have the protection. Like everything I needed to know, right? Took such great care of me. And then a couple of months later, I got, as a total surprise and delight, hand-painted portraits of Bandit and Bear from Chewy. Now, I had not sent them pictures. They had seen pictures that I posted on social media, connected the dots back to the CRM. So now I have these hand-painted portraits that hang on my wall. And when people come over and say, like, did you get pictures painted of your dogs? I get to say, no, Chewy sent me those, and tell the story again and again. And the lesson, or one of the many lessons from that story, is find a way to be so good that your customers can't help but tell their friends.
Yeah.
Where can you show up in a way that people are like, I have to tell that story. I have to talk about that. I have to post that online. I have to like mention that the next time I'm out with my friends.
I love saying all things being equal, the business that provides the best experience always wins, right? And you said it well.
Every time.
They're selling a commodity like everybody else, but have found this way to separate themselves on the experience, which, for anyone listening, but I think for financial advisors, like, yeah, your planning may be a little different, but generally speaking, it's pretty similar to what all other advisors are doing. So being able to find that way to create that experience. What I love too, just even when you were here in the office, but hearing even a little more there, is like they've taught their people how to like be proactive and take ownership of situations, right? Like you don't have to think. It's like, what would create a great experience here? Just do that. Like, you don't have to think about it over and over. So it's a good example. Everyone's probably going to go order from them now. So,
Well, and so I told that story at an event once, and somebody was like people always tell me their Chewy stories or their pet stories after I speak and share that. And a woman came up to me and said, "Hey, I worked at a call center that was doing stuff for Chewy. Have you noticed that when you call Chewy, you don't hear this call may be recorded for training purposes?" And I was like, "Oh no, I never thought about it." And she said, the Chewy leadership team said, we don't want to have that because that adds like 3 seconds to the amount of time somebody waits to get help. And the pushback was, well, if you do that, you can't record the calls. And they said,
yeah.
that's fine. We don't need to record the calls. We don't have to record calls for training purposes. We train our people. We trust our people. We don't need to listen in on them. So they don't record their calls, A, because they trust their people, and B, because they don't want their customers waiting just that 3 extra seconds to hear that message. So that kind of laser focus, that kind of attention to every detail to say, how can I make this just a little bit better? How can I make this just a little bit easier? How can I make this just a little bit more personal? All of those things add up. And to use an advisor term, the compounded interest of all of that starts to be a pretty big deal when you've made all of those intentional small changes over time.
That's good. Way to tie the advisor lingo in there too.
Did I get it right?
Yes,
Money
yes.
is not always my strong suit. But
Okay, I know you've got a hard stop here in 6 minutes, so I want to hit you with just these lightning round questions at the end that we ask. Can be quick answers, just kind of first thing comes to mind. So first one is, I'll say going back to COVID, it made everyone rethink everything they knew about, let's say, leadership. But is there one lesson that you learned over the past few years that you feel you'll carry forward for the rest of your life?
I think it's that it is unrealistic to think that your employees have like an emotional like off switch that they switch and like leave their life stuff when they come into to work, right?
Yep.
Like there is no differentiation. You've got to coach the human side of your employees. You've got to enable and empower and support them in every part of their life so that they can show up and do the best job possible, because there's no separation, no delineation. If something is bothering them personally, it is going to affect their performance professionally.
Every time. Great reminder for people. Okay, second one. What is the one thing that you did that graduated? Maybe this is speaking. You're obviously incredible at that, writing, but graduated you from being good to great?
Oh, I love this question. I would say investing in training. I have always felt that I am the very best investment that I can make with my money, with my time, with my intention. I'm not afraid to pay for coaching. I'm not afraid to pay for the best in the world to help me get better. So I am a huge believer that everyone should invest, find the people who are doing or who have helped the people do what it is that you want to do, and get as much time with them as you can to become more like them.
Awesome transition to the next question. Is there something you're doing to drive your own personal growth, like in the next year, that you're excited about?
Yes, something that makes me very uncomfortable, but that's, where the growth always comes from. So I have done about 50 keynotes this year, and some of them I recorded, some of them I didn't. I watched very little tape, as they would say in the football world. I am committed to every single event that I do for the next year. I'm going to watch back and find ways to get better, because, there's like certain things you can only practice on stage, right? Like you can practice it, but like you have to have that real-time audience feedback. And I'm somebody who likes to change things up every time I'm on stage. So I'm going to force myself to watch back the tape and find at least 3 things that I can do to improve before the next time I get on stage every time I speak.
I heard this story about Garth Brooks once, that he would bring his team and they would watch every single concert the next day and just evaluate like what worked, what didn't, where can we get better. Probably a reason, he's such an incredible performer. So, okay, it cannot be your book, although people should pick up your book. But is there one book that you've recommended the most to other entrepreneurs or business owners?
I'm going to give you 2 answers, because one is one that I probably recommended the most. The other is the one that is most recent that I'm recommending. So the one
Okay.
that I've probably recommended the most over the past 2 years, it's called Soundtracks, and it's by an author named John Acuff, who I love. You should listen to his podcast. It's called All It Takes Is a Goal. But Soundtracks is about the negative thoughts that we have as leaders, how to replace them with positive thoughts. So it's a really, really great book about bringing more intentionality to like your inner dialogue, because your thoughts become your beliefs and therefore your reality. So it's called Soundtracks. It's a wonderful book. The second one that just came out, but is fantastic. It's from my buddy, Joey Coleman. He, probably like 4 years ago, wrote a book called Never Lose a Customer Again,
Yep.
which has sold hundreds of thousands of copies. Just a couple of months ago, he came out with a companion book to that called Never Lose an Employee Again. And it's got a 100-day roadmap of the exact things to do for the first 100 days somebody is on your team, to make sure that they are going to not just stay at your company, but stay focused and aligned in the things that matter the most.
I actually had 2 buddies text me. We'd had Joey speak a while ago and just said, "Hey, have you read this new book he's got out?" So good to hear that. So,
I
okay,
just had dinner with him 2 nights ago in DC. He is
nice.
brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Final question: best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Ooh, the best piece of advice I've ever received is don't take no from anyone without the final authority to say yes.
That's good.
The no doesn't matter unless their yes is the ultimate yes.
Yes, that's good. Great advice. Okay, Brittany, thank you for the time today. I know we have a hard stop, so I want to get you out of here. I appreciate you so much spending some time and just sharing with us. How can people, obviously, they should pick up the book, Creating Superfans. You have a great podcast. I just listened, actually, after you were here to your show you did with our buddy Jay Bear. So that was great. Love Jay, and you have so much in common. But just what's the best way for people to follow along and stay in touch with you?
Well, you can find everything you need to know at BrittanyHodak.com. I've got all kinds of free goodies and resources, and it'll point you in the right direction to whatever you're looking for, whether it's podcast or social. So just go to BrittanyHodak.com and you can find all of the things.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. For everyone who listens, especially this one is a great one to go share with your team. Everyone is in the business of creating a great experience, so make sure everyone gets a chance to listen to this. And as I say all the time, remember, our world needs great leaders more than ever today, so go be great. Brittany, again, thank you.
Thank you, Cody.